A busy week for Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He travels to Saudi Arabia to meet with Ukrainian and Saudi counterparts. Then he travels to Canada to join the G7 Conference of Foreign Ministers, where the Ukraine war will be front and center. Joining us now to discuss President Trump and Marco Rubio's foreign policy is Mike Leon, NTD News contributor and the host of the Can We Please Talk podcast. Mike, always good to see you. Let's first start with the Saudis. They're oil rich, and Trump announced early on that his first state visit would be to Saudi Arabia. Now he's expecting to court a $1 trillion investment into the U.S. Also in Trump's first term, he was pretty close to getting the Saudis into the Abraham Accords to normalize their relations with Israel. What can we expect from Rubio's meetings this week and the Saudis more generally during Trump's second term?
Yeah, great question to start off, Kerry. Good to see you first and foremost on this Monday morning. Time change, right? It's so dark outside, but be that as it may. But let's hope that we get some bright light coming in from these peace negotiations, Kerry, with respect to all this, because this is the second time Marco Rubio has gone out to Saudi Arabia. And, you know, I love the way you framed the question, because Saudi Arabia has become paramount now, and they're starting to blend into with respect to what Trump tried to do in the first presidential administration. He felt he had a good relationship with them. He felt that Saudi Arabia could help quell tensions in the Middle East. And so he reached out to them, like you mentioned, about the Abraham Accords. And now in this second term, they've been kind of this neutral meeting point, first with Russian officials and Lavrov and Rubio meeting out there, and now with Ukrainian counterparts. This is an untenable situation for Marco Rubio, because if you know this, Kerry, if you followed American politics, when he was a senator, when he was running for president, he's been very staunch about Russia and Vladimir Putin. He's always maintained positions about Putin being a dictator in Russia. Now he has the untenable situation where he has to be the Secretary of State, and he has to carry out the policy positions from a foreign affairs perspective of the President of the United States. And President Trump right now has made it clear that he wants to negotiate between two countries, but we all agree that, at least most of us should agree, that the aggressor in this situation was Russia. So right now, it's an untenable situation, because Rubio really has to relay the policy positions of the administration while also making sure that Ukrainian officials know that the United States does have their back. And it's tough to do that when we recently just paused aid to the country. And the president just mentioned there in the package, there was an attack that happened in Ukraine just last week. So this is a tough situation, but I do hope that there are some more talks that reign from this, and we kind of get somewhere where we're starting to get pen to paper and we're getting both countries to the negotiating table and the war being settled.
Yes, as you mentioned, more drone attacks from Russia. Rubio always, when he was a senator, maintaining a very strong stance against Russia. Trump even threatened sanctions because of the escalation, not the de-escalation, coming out of Russia. So in terms of real progress, what's the order of operations that you see? Is it the minerals deal? The EU starts to get involved with these negotiations that have just been U.S.-Russia? Or when does the ceasefire come in place before a lasting peace? How do you see all of this sequencing?
Yeah, and Kerry, again, this is part of what I was mentioning to you, and I think we talked about this last week with respect to the communication part of this, right? Because you have Keith Kellogg, who's the special envoy to Ukraine, and he's mentioned about the minerals deal. He thinks that that's a good starting point. He's somebody that's very staunch, that pro-Ukraine, again, has the same type of positions like Marco Rubio about Russia's aggression and what they've done and trying to go westward. And so you have him and Marco Rubio both out there knowing the positions, like we just mentioned, of how they feel about Russia. But then you have President Trump, who, again, in the Oval Office, I want to use his words, Zelensky has a lot of hate towards Russia. I can't negotiate with that, I can't tell Putin this and then expect Putin to come to the negotiating table. So it's a mixed message flurry, if you will, Kerry. It's Monday morning, so my terms and analogies are not going to be the best. But this is part of the issue that at least I'm having, and speaking with, again, other people that have worked for former administrations on behalf of Ukraine. And then I've spoken with people who've worked in the previous Trump administration back in 2017 that know the way he's thinking from a foreign affairs perspective. I think this is where rubber meets the road, and now it's incumbent upon Europe. And you saw with Prime Minister Starmer and obviously Macron and other European leaders say, look, we may have to go this alone. And I want to real quick mention that I think Saudi Arabia is paramount in this. Obviously, we talked about it from an economic standpoint, but the way they're trying to negotiate peace, on two different wars, Kerry, one in Ukraine, one in their semi-backyard with respect to Gaza and Israel. I think that's paramount. I think President Trump going there, I think maybe he thinks the Saudis, and I'm starting to think it now as well as as I'm hearing it back in my head, he thinks that this is a neutral place where the Saudis can actually maintain peace amongst not only the Middle East region, but they can negotiate it and broker it between Russia and Ukraine. So I think it's a good starting point. I hope that the talks really do ramp up and we get something somewhere soon.
And Mike, as we finish up, is the progress that hopefully happens in Saudi Arabia going to set the table for what should come later in the week at the G7 in Canada?
Yeah, look, a big week. Obviously, a new Canadian prime minister is going to be taking over soon after Trudeau, and Marco Rubio obviously going to Canada. We've seen the recent news about the tariffs and how that would actually impact not only imports but exports and our relationship with Canada and obviously our neighbor to the south with Mexico. So again, this is another one of those situations for Marco Rubio where. And he's mentioned this as somebody who sat on the Relations Committee in the Senate, like he understands the value of what the first Trump administration did with kind of getting rid of NAFTA and putting together an agreement between Canada and Mexico. Now he has to go out there and kind of not semi-defend the tariffs, but also explain what it is that their position would be in terms of this alliance between the people that live on the same continent with us and our neighbors to the north in Canada. So it's a tough situation for Marco Rubio. I wouldn't want to be in his position, Kerry, but I also think that there's a reason why President Trump put Marco Rubio in place, and I think it's because of the years of experience and negotiation and meeting with foreign dignitaries and counterparts, and he's able to really put people at ease with respect to what this administration wants to carry out. And being the number 3 in the country, I think the G7 leaders there will know that Marco Rubio is somebody that has been known in American politics for the last decade plus, and he's somebody that you can count on his word and count on what it is that he's trying to, at least deliver to them from what the administration's position is on everything with respect to relationships, tariffs, et cetera.
Well, we appreciate your analysis as always. Mike Leon, NTD contributor, as well as host of the Can We Please Talk podcast. We'll see you soon, Mike.
Thanks, Gary.